Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban. Welcome to episode 122 of the podcast for July 4th, 2011. It's a holiday today, but I recorded the session last month with Paul Akers, the president and founder of a company called FastCap in Bellingham, Washington. And I think maybe it's appropriate to release this on July 4th because we're also going to be talking about an initiative of Paul's, leanamerica.org. That's the website you can go to, talking about Paul's efforts to try to help promote lean, not only through government. There are a lot of efforts in different states and cities, including right there in Paul's area, which he'll talk about in the podcast here. But also, Paul's efforts to just spread lean more broadly. He's doing a lot of volunteer work through this nonprofit, sharing and teaching and allowing people to come visit FastCap, which is a company that's done a lot of great work with lean and Kaizen, especially with staff engagement. So I would also recommend go to YouTube and look for FastCap TV, which is their YouTube channel. I'll link to it at leanblog.org/122, which is the blog post for this episode. You can go to leanpodcast.org for past episodes. And as always, thanks a lot for listening. Well, Paul, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm really excited to have you as a guest on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, Mark. You're a big fan. I'm a big fan of you, and I'd love to help you out and talk about my favorite subject in the whole world, which is lean.
Yeah. So why don't we start off, if you can introduce yourself and some of your background. I always like to ask people, how did you first get exposed to lean? Because there's usually an interesting story there, and talk about your company, FastCap.
Yeah, well, I have an incredible story how I got introduced to lean. And when I look back on it, it's almost miraculous that I actually bought off on it, because our company, FastCap, is a 13-year-old product development company. We develop woodworking tools and equipment, and we are very, very successful. And pre-lean, we were very, very successful. 3 years in to starting my company in my garage, we were extremely profitable. We had won many awards, won Business of the Year. The bank was willing to loan us any amount of money we wanted. As a matter of fact, the story I tell, 1 week before learning about lean for the first time, the bank president was walking through our facility because they were going to make us a $250,000 line of credit. And, for a small company, the banks don't give out $250,000 lines of credit because that's a pretty risky thing. Mm-hmm. And they decided they were going to do it for us, but the bank president wanted to take one last walk to make sure the loan committee didn't make any mistakes. So he wanted to come to our facility. He walked around it. And when he got done with the tour, he leaned against one of our machines and he said, Paul, I've never been in a business so well run, so well managed, so well disciplined, so well organized. I'd give you any amount of money you wanted. And I said, wow, that's encouraging. That's not the kind of words you hear from banks. They don't do those kinds of things. So I was feeling pretty good about myself, and rightfully so. I had a rich background in construction and manufacturing. I worked for Bob Taylor Guitars. I worked with him building the first 2,000 guitars with Taylor Guitars, and I was part of the construction project on the home for Architectural Digest in Bel Air, and I built $10 million condo projects when I was just a young kid at 23 years old. So I did a lot of edgy things, and I was comfortable in the manufacturing world. I thought I knew what I was doing. And then a week later, this is the funny part of the story, is I hired a consultant to come in and help me manage inventory. And this guy was from the Washington Manufacturers Association, and he walked around my facility, did the same walk the bank president did a week earlier. But this time, when he got to the end of the tour, I said, Tracy, can you help me? And he looked at me and said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, what do you mean you don't know? And he said, well, you have some problems. And I said, well, like what? And he said, well, you don't know how to manufacture. You don't know what you're doing. So, I was up against a rock and a hard place here.
How do you reconcile those two assessments?
So different, right? So I said, well, what's my problem? And he said, you need to learn TPS, the Toyota Production System, which I'd never heard of, or lean manufacturing, or Kaizen. And I said, how do I learn it? And he said, hire some consultants. So I convinced my wife to let me hire these consultants at, $20,000 a week. They were ridiculously expensive, but very effective. And they came in and basically took everything that I had done and dismantled it and changed it. So the story that I tell are two particular areas that they changed dramatically. Is we got rid of all of our finished goods. We had racks and racks and racks of finished goods, and we got rid of it all. And the way they got rid of it is they walked over to the machines that were making it, and they said, "Why are you making so much?" And we said, "Well, because our setup times are really difficult and they're long, and they take 45 minutes to get the machine running good parts." And they said, "Well, we're going to work on that." So they proceeded to work on it, and within 1 week, they had transformed it from 45 minutes setup time and change out to 5 minutes.
Wow.
It's just incredible the stuff they did, and obviously I became a true believer, if you would, pretty quickly when I saw what they were doing. And then the next thing is we make a laser leveling device called the Laser Jam, and that we were building 100 of them at a time. It's an aluminum extruded system, and it's pretty complicated. And we build 100 at a time, big batch work. We had huge assembly tables with all the different batches as they'd move through the process. And they said, "Well, we're not going to do that anymore. We're only going to build one at a time." And then they first made me build paper airplanes, and then I got it. And then we started disassembling that whole area, and they started building one at a time. We took that process again from 45 minutes to build one Laser Jam at 100 pieces at a time down to 7 minutes. So dramatic improvements, and all the mistakes that we were making were eliminated because we caught those as we did one-piece flow. So that's really how I got started with Lean, and I went from being a very good company in everyone's eyes to being a dramatically better company, and that's not the normal Lean story. Most people are up against a wall when they implement Lean. I was just the opposite. We were rocking.
Yeah, and you've shared so many stories, and especially the great videos. I'd encourage anybody listening to go to YouTube and find the FastCap TV channel. And those videos show just the amazing way that your employees appear to be engaged, and they're excited about making improvements and making things better in the workplace. The creativity and the innovation and the continuous improvement is just a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah, well, to quote a country western singer, Gretchen Wilson, my people are all jacked up. They love what they do, and they are empowered to do what they do. We just are doing employee reviews right now, and every one of them I ask as they come in, I say, "Do you like working here?" And they say, "Yes." And I say, "Why?" And they say, "Because I have freedom. Because I don't have to ask people to do things, because I can make a decision and try my ideas, and if I fail, you're not going to be mad at me. All you want me to do is learn." And that is a culture of continuous improvement, and that is just carte blanche from just about every employee I have. That's the common theme is, you treat me like I'm a human being and like I have a brain.
Yeah.
So
You've done great things in the business world at FastCap, and now let's transition and talk a little bit about your pathway into looking at and advocating lean methods in government. You ran for the U.S. Senate nomination in Washington State in 2010. You're now involved with your leanamerica.org initiative. So can you talk about that transition into the political and the government realm? Do you think, how do lean principles apply? Can you create a culture and an environment inside the Beltway or in government settings where people are excited and reducing waste and providing more value for the taxpayers? How do you see that translating?
Well, I think it translates perfectly. I don't think there is one iota difference in government than in a woodworking product development company. People are people. People are creative. People have great ideas. What people need is leadership excellence. And ultimately, that's what Lean's about. We call it, operational excellence, but it's really leadership excellence. So if you get a leader like Gary Jensen, the mayor of Ferndale, or Bill Alpo, the sheriff of Whatcom County, who I'm working with, or Rob McKenna, the attorney general, these are all people that we've worked with that have toured our facility, that we're training. And when these leaders see the power of what Lean can do, and they unleash that creativity, i.e. their people's creativity to solve small problems every day, then it translates perfectly. I mean, there's no There's no special thing you have to do because it's government. You just ask your people what bugs you, as Carl Waldenson says, and allow them to implement changes on a small, manageable level on a daily basis, and you get the same exact result in government as you would in private industry. At least that's what I'm experiencing.
So is part of the problem, it seems that in politics or government, people are always looking for the big idea. Does that get in the way of the smaller continuous improvement type thinking? And can you talk about maybe some of the examples there in Washington state or local government that you're aware of where people are engaged in continuous improvement?
Well, I love examples. I think talk is cheap, especially theorists. I'm not into theory. So Rob McKenna is a great example. I'll just start with him. Rob McKenna, our Attorney General, who's running for governor, has less people in the Attorney General's office today than he did when he started 6 years ago, and he's cranking out a lot more work. Why? Because he realized that if he allowed his people to make continuous improvements in his organization, that they could actually, just through attrition, eliminate people. Although the main thing of lean is not to eliminate jobs, but in government, in this case, government often has way too many people doing work. And so you don't have to lay people off. You just don't have to keep filling those jobs as people retire. And that's what Rob's done. And it's been very successful, and he's getting more for less. It's that simple. And then if we switch over to Bill Alfo, the sheriff of Whatcom County, just in the first week or two that they implemented lean after touring our facility, and they come there all the time. The sheriff's deputies basically live at our facility, and the running joke is they always think some big crime's happening at FastCap. There's always about 10 patrol cars parked outside our facility because there's always police officers in our facility learning lean. But just in the first 2 weeks, they were feeding all the inmates in the jail, and they were always giving them a tray with silverware and everything like that. And then after every meal, they'd have to count and account for all those silverware. And they quit doing all that. They gave it to them in a brown paper bag. They eliminated 90% of the cleanup and all the counting of high-end employees going through this whole process. They cut $43,000 just in that one small little change. And that's engaging their people to solve problems. And then Gary Jensen, the city of Ferndale, this is really incredible because we were building a new facility in Ferndale. It took 2 years to get the permits for our facility, 2 years and over $200,000 for permits. Well, Gary's building department, that's where we started first with lean there. They're cranking out building permits in 1 day now.
Wow. Talk about taking, I mean, that's a value stream to take waste out of, right?
I think that works, It's pretty awesome.
So you've got examples of where this works. So tell us more about Lean America, leanamerica.org, the message that you're spreading and the impact you're hoping to have. I mean, it says here on the website, transforming government by empowering people is a high-level message. Tell us about that initiative.
Well, that's really the essence of lean. It's really just about saying that people matter, respecting people, and allowing them to have a voice. And so I'm trying to teach government leaders that you can do that. You can actually trust your people and start small, like Gary Jensen did and like Bill Alfo did, and it will actually accumulate to something substantive. So that's what my goal is. But I'm going to be honest with you, Mark. Well, initially, Lean America was primarily geared towards towards government. It is now heavily involved with businesses. We're also training Bangor, Washington, the military base, the nuclear base there. Those people are regularly touring our facility. Theta, our Group Health is regularly touring our facility. So we're dealing with a lot of different organizations. And I think the point is we have opened it up and we're training businesses and government organizations because I think at the end of the day, Mark, here's my agenda. I want to educate people that there is a better way. And the more people that understand lean principles and implement them, then I think the expectation of the constituents, whether it be in Texas or in Washington, are going to say to their government leaders, hey, do you know anything about lean? Because I'm not going to give you my vote unless you're clued in to world-class business principles. Because I know if you don't know this, you are going to waste my money. That's my agenda. I want to educate people on lean, and we do it all for free. We charge nothing for the videos. We're not in it for the money. We could care less about it. Mm-hmm. We're in it to help people and basically say thank you to America for everything America's given me with the wild success of my company, because I wouldn't be able to do this really at the level I'm doing it anywhere else in the world.
So how, in terms of people getting that education, do they come and visit you in FastCap in Bellingham, Washington, or are you taking the show on the road?
Well, we do a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of different methodologies to achieve that. The number one way we do it is we have what's called a Learn to See tour, which is about 2 hours long. It starts at 7:15 in the morning till about 9 o'clock. It's a very lean tour in that I know a lot of tours are very long, 6-7 hours long. We distill it down into 2 hours and we crank it out. By the time you get done with this in 2 hours, you're so overloaded you couldn't fit another thing in. So there's no sense in going for a third or fourth hour. So that's the number one vehicle is we have a lean tour. We train people there. Usually the groups are anywhere between 10 and 30 people at a time. We do them every Friday, although we're taking a hiatus during the summer because we're so overwhelmed we can't keep up with the number of tours that people want to come. We have people literally come from all over the world to tour our facility. We've had German companies in there. We've had lots of Canadian companies. We've worked with Bombardier, Learjet. We're training some companies up in Calgary right now that are coming down, and companies from Florida, aerospace companies, just the whole gamut. You name it, we have people coming there. So that's number one. The second way we do it is we have a radio show called The American Innovator, and that's every Saturday. I just got off the air just before I came on with you, mm-hmm. and that is another vehicle, 1 hour long. We talk about lean principles and how to teach businesses and people how to start thinking and seeing waste. And then the third way, I'm 51 years old and I can't remember what it is. The third way is I speak a lot. And I did forget, actually, just for one moment, but fortunately I'm only 51 and it came back to me quickly. I speak a lot. I just had an interesting experience. I was just asked by a group in Salt Lake City to come speak to a group of pastors. So I flew out there and I spoke to an evangelical group of pastors on lean in the church. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm not speaking in Washington somewhere, in Utah, those are the three vehicles. And then I'm almost got my book done, which is called 2 Second Lean. And that will be done maybe in about another month or 6 weeks. And that, I think, also will be a great vehicle to teach the principles that we believe in.
Yeah. That's exciting to hear about all of that. And in the time we have left, it's just a couple of other questions. So you talk about the idea that, in upcoming elections, you would hope voters would say, I'm not going to vote for you unless you embrace lean principles. As a quick aside, I would hope, hospital patients might sort of demand the same thing of the healthcare system and say, I'm not going to come not have my procedure done here unless you're taking lean seriously. But what's your, try to make forecasts for 2012, and there's others now talking about lean. Newt Gingrich has talked about lean and Six Sigma for government. Do you see candidates embracing this and talking about it? Do you see candidates in both parties hopefully embracing this?
I do. I've heard President Obama talk about it, and I'm hearing this nomenclature espoused everywhere I go. I know, for instance, the Attorney General is running for governor. Every speech he gives, he talks about lean manufacturing and the Toyota production system. That, frankly, Mark, is unheard of. That's not what you hear out of politicians, and yet that is what people are saying. Bill Alpo saying the same thing. Gary Jensen saying the same thing. People are getting it, and it's the big deal, and it's very exciting. And I'm hearing on the national level, and I know that you and I have the same goals. We're trying to make this a better country,
right?
And everybody's contributing. I know Mike George, who you just introduced me to, is doing the same thing. And I think collectively, and Dr. John Toussaint, we're all working together the same goal. We just want a better, more thoughtful America. And I think we're going to get there because we're not going to give up.
And hopefully there's a shift in some of the discussion when we talk about waste in government. I think back even to the Clinton administration. Al Gore, as vice president, had an initiative of trying to reduce waste. I don't think anybody was using lean terminology. It seems sometimes in politics, a question for you here. I mean, when we talk about waste in government, that's often code for, programs of that other party that we don't agree with.
Right.
But, do you think people will start embracing the idea of, taking a look at what government is doing and trying to do that with better quality and better efficiency?
Well, I think it's interesting that you would say that, because my campaign platform was 10-3 lean. It said to cut government across the board, Republican and Democrat and Libertarian, you name it, cut them all by 10%. The military, the White House, I don't care, the senator's salaries, the representative salaries, the cost to run the Capitol. Every last program is cut 10% for 3 consecutive years, and then implement a lean strategy simultaneously. If you did those simple things, you would find out that, hey, we've got plenty of money. As I like to say, Mark, our bucket is full. We do not have an empty bucket. It's empty because we're sloppy with the resources we have. Mm-hmm. It is not empty because we need more water and we need more buckets.
And a final question for you here before we wrap up. I actually sent a message out on Twitter that I was going to be interviewing you. So Joe Dager, his Twitter name's @business901, had a question for you. With candidates talking about lean, there's a risk. There's a lot of lip service that could be taking place, and lean doesn't mean anything without sustainability, which comes from people and culture. What are your hopes about being able to replace or improve that Beltway culture? Would it take 5 or 10 years, or what are your thoughts about sort of trying to embed this in part of the Washington culture?
Well, I think for sure the realistic target would be 5 to 10 years, 10 years. But I think the pressure is on right now. I think the pressure's on from people like Mike George, myself, yourself, and a lot of other people. And, some crazy things could happen. It could happen in just a couple years with 1 or 2 strategically placed leaders. If you get some high-level leaders that can demonstrate that this works and that it is not partisan politics, it is not about Republican or Democrat, it's about results, I think we could turn it much quicker. But I think in a normal business map plan, I think 10 years is realistic. But my goal is much faster than that. That's for sure. And I'm working my butt off to make it happen.
Well, I'm glad that you are, and your enthusiasm is certainly contagious, and I'm glad that you're working so hard to try to help influence things both in Washington State and throughout the country, all the way out to Washington D.C. So, Paul, it's a pleasure talking to you. I'm glad I finally got to have you on the podcast, and hopefully we'll be able to talk soon and talk about some of the progress that you're making in all these areas.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I love being on your show.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.